Thank you for coming to our third Soundtrap snippet, and this week we're going to be looking at volume. And I pre-prepared some information here, 4 tracks, just a bit of forest sound and some footsteps in the forest and a nice bit of guitar, and then a little bit of voice. This is just me talking nonsense just to demonstrate how you might piece it all together. And just have a quick listen to that little bit so we can see that how all of it fits together.
This is where you would start to record the voice, and of course once the voice comes in you can now hopefully hear that all the other tracks have been muted.
Now of course at the moment the other tracks haven't been muted or their volumes haven't been reduced, but we can control that. A couple of ways we can do it. The guitar is particularly loud, so I can literally just grab the volume on that single track and reduce it manually. And if I do that first and then demonstrate that just so you can see it, I'll get into the center of it so you'll hear it.
Record the voice, and of course once the voice comes in you can now hopefully hear that all the other tracks have been muted.
And that works fine. So we've got control over each individual track, but of course that controls the track for the whole run of that track, so the whole time of that track. So what I might need to do instead of doing that is I might need to go to the automation button here, select a volume automation, and instead of it being at that volume all the time, I can raise the volume, and I go along this line in my automation, and each time I click on it, it gives me a little edit point that allows me to reduce the volume where and when I need it. So we've now got the situation where the volume is going to be much lower on the guitar whilst the voice is speaking, but then it increases again afterwards. And if we just go back to where we are there, I'll just go back a little bit, so you should hear the volume reduce just before the voice comes in now.
This is where you would start to record the voice, and of course once the voice comes in you can now hopefully hear that all the other tracks have been muted.
So you can actually then set a volume profile, if you like, that runs through the whole thing, and if other bits of voices come in you can then add a more control. So you've got an enormous amount of control over how the volume of a single track works, and you can of course do that for every single track. So I could then add one to the footsteps and decide that the footsteps got louder at one point, you know, if it was part of the story and wanted to increase the tension or whatever. So you can actually use the volume profile to adjust the volume of each and every track. Okay, so other things that you can do, this here you can see, because it's got dashes, you can tell that this is a piece of MIDI. So you can actually, within a piece of MIDI, if you wanted to, if you go to the piano roll and select the velocity button here, you can actually adjust the velocity of individual notes. So if you want a really particular, you can hear that volume increasing and decreasing as I go through. Okay, so you've got a very, very subtle, I mean, it's not what I would necessarily suggest you did for every single note, but if there's a particular moment that you need quite an important either sudden drop or a very sudden increase in volume, you could manage it in there. And if I zoom in a little bit so I can see a few, oops, too far, sorry. There we go. So we can see a few notes. If you highlight all the notes, I've got volume. Come on, behave. Oh, I've gone too far to the right. That's why. That's where I need to be, because I've got my loop on. So I can highlight a number and then highlight a number and then reduce the velocity of just a short phrase, for example. So volume across a whole track, reducing and rising the volume. Velocity for individual notes or groups of notes, if you want to have a very specific effect, allows you to control that volume as well. And then I'm just going to zoom back out here so we can see the whole thing again. And one last little thing about volume, I'm just going to turn these off and get rid of them, just so we can see everything a little bit better. So they're all in one place, and turn automation off and turn automation off. Yep, end of the piece, the story's finished, and you want to have a nice little gentle fade out. You can hover over each of these tracks, and when you hover over, just above the circular arrow, there's a little white dot there. Your mouse turns to a double-ended arrow, and you can use that to fade a track out. And you can see that you kind of get a grayed section bit that shows you it's fading out. Just going to undo that, because clearly if this is the end of the piece, you'd probably want all three of them to fade at the same rate. So I've highlighted them all. Then when you grab, it didn't highlight them all. There we go. When you grab one, all three fade at the same time. And whilst it's a bit tricky to catch at the very beginning, there's also that same dot there. So you could also fade things in. Okay, so to very, very quickly summarize, volume for each individual track, of course, that's what you would expect. Yeah. A specific volume profile across a single track that you can control, yeah, in very fine detail. And if you zoom in, you can be really, really precise about this, about how the thing behaves. And then for MIDI tracks particularly, going to the settings by clicking on here and go to piano roll and select velocity, and you can actually adjust the effect of individual notes by dragging up or dragging down on the screen. You can hear it getting louder and quieter there. And those are the tricks on how to manipulate your volume in Soundtrap.